Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint's Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. You've heard their point, now listen to the counterpoint.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. We are coming at you on August 18th of 2021. So we are about, now it's almost through to, 2/3 of a year into the Biden administration. And there's always something to talk about. But this show, though, is going to be a little bit different. We have a special guest. But before we get into that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our lower left-hand corner this time, we have Leon the Word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our lower right-hand corner here, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And our special guest today that we'll be interviewing is Spike Cohen. He was the vice presidential candidate this last time around in 2020 for the Libertarian Party. So, you guys certainly sounded great compared to the other candidates. I just don't know why you guys aren't there, but
well, we came in third. We came in third, if nothing else. We came in third.
Yeah, gosh, I just so wish that you guys could have gotten on the debate stage with those guys, because just felt like
yes.
Oh gosh, yeah.
That's why we weren't on the debate stage. Like, if you watch what those performances were like. Yes. The one thing that if there's nothing else, and there's actually many things Republicans and Democrats agree upon, like, for example, the fact that every day is a special new day to screw the American people over just a little bit more than the day before. But one thing they definitely agree on is, if anyone else gets up there on the debate stage or in the main spotlight of the campaign that isn't their nonsense, they're going to win, or at the very least, they're going to make major headway and a huge dent in this whole, left, right, red, blue, false dichotomy they've created. And they know that. So they're going to do everything they can to shut us out. So, it's that first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. We're past the laugh at you, and now they're at the fight you part. And the next step is winning.
Yeah.
Indeed. I like that. I like the sound of that.
Well, it definitely appears you're still very much politically active. I was just at Freedom Fest, and you gave a rousing speech out there on the main stage. It seemed like a real call to action, the libertarian folks, liberty-minded people. So, hopefully that's reaching a lot of people. But I guess we wanted to just find out a little bit more about you to start off the interview. So can you tell us, sure, I guess, a little bit about how you got into the liberty movement and a little bit about your past?
So politically, what got me into the liberty movement was basically being disabused of everything that I previously thought. I was a neocon. I was, when 9/11 happened, I was 19, and the media and the government told me that the reason that this happened was because the terrorists hated us for our freedom, and they were just chomping at the bit for a chance to, kill all of us because of, our clothes were too revealing and our music was too vulgar, or whatever nonsense they said, that we were just too free, we had way too much freedom, and they just didn't like that, and they were very bitter about our freedom, and they were going to kill us all because of it, and therefore we had to kill all of them first. And I was we had to kill as many people as possible to spread our peaceful ways
in the name of defense. Yeah,
in the name of defense, safety, democracy, freedom, and peace, really. And it's kind of incredible that I thought this stuff. When I look back at some of the things I used to say, and I'm so thankful I wasn't on social media. There wasn't social media back then. So I'm like, man, that would be really embarrassing. People would say, "Did you tweet this?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm very sorry for all of my tweets prior to 2008 or 9." But what happened was there were, and this is a lesson I took on how to bring people in. There were libertarians who operated in conservative circles. So like, Matt Kibbe was a big one for me. Everyone talks about Ron Paul. For me, it was Matt Kibbe. Ron Paul was definitely there as well, but Matt Kibbe was the big one. He was a part of a group called Freedom Works, and he would send out these emails where he was talking about, since we're all a bunch of small government people here, how are you going to have a small government with an imperial war policy and warrantless surveillance of every single American, and putting people in Gitmo without trial for the rest of their lives? And I'm like, you just want the terrorists to win. But the thing is, everything he was saying made sense from my precepts. I wanted a smaller government. I wanted lower taxes. I wanted less regulation of my businesses because I had started a business at 16, and that's where my background is in business. And so that all appealed to me. But then when he was so wrong on this other thing, but it was consistent with everything else, that coupled with honestly a lot of loved ones and people I knew coming home from Afghanistan and Iraq and saying, it's all a lie. Like what you're being told is not what's happening over there. You know, the people that are re-enlisting, they're just there to help try to save their friends. They feel like they have to stay there while their friends are still there to keep them safe. But we're not accomplishing anything real over there. That really made me not become a neocon anymore. And then over time, I sort of started re-examining, well, if I was wrong about this, what else am I wrong about? And that kind of led me on the path to becoming a libertarian. What got me into the liberty movement and the party was actually Vermin Supreme. So I was in the liberty movement doing my podcasting after I retired from my company 4 years ago. I started podcasting, and my goal was to bring in normies to libertarianism. So I actually intentionally didn't really do a lot of messaging within the liberty movement or within the LP because I was trying to be this like, hey, I'm just this guy out here who's talking about this weird thing called libertarianism. Let's find out more about it. And so I wasn't really well known in the party. After I met Vermin Supreme and he asked me to run as his prospective running mate during the nomination contest, I thought, okay, great. I'll go in and I'll explain to people, how they can spread the message of liberty and, how we can reach out to people. And I did door knocking tours in neighborhoods and in housing projects. I did college campus tours, went up to New Hampshire for the primaries, talked with voters there, and all the while saying, listen, this is how we can spread liberty. This is how we can get out there and spread the message of liberty. I at that time didn't really think they were going to pick me as the VP nominee. I thought they'd take my message and then go with, I don't know, Larry Sharp or whoever Justin Amash wanted or whatever. And then that didn't happen. They actually went with me. And so I had to kind of shift. I was like, oh, okay, so I'm the guy now. So that's what I did last year. And coming out of that, my pledge was I'm not going anywhere. We're just getting started. And that's what we're doing. We're just getting started. We're going to see an America set free in our time. And it's going to be because we're doing the work to do it.
Indeed. Indeed. Indeed.
Well, no pessimism around here.
Well, I don't think there should be any. I mean, as long as human beings exist and as long as human beings have that desire to be free, I think the chains will be broken. Well, I'm always like on this. Yes.
Yep, absolutely, man. I think it's weird because there's two weird things that happen once we aren't kids anymore. When we're kids, when we're like babies and kids, we want protection and safety, but we also have this desire to be able to do our own thing. And we're told as little kids, you don't hurt people, you don't take from people without their consent, you don't touch people without their consent, you don't do anything that is harming anyone else. We're taught about the golden rule, don't do unto others as you would have to unto you. This is all basically the NAP, right? This is all the idea of respect the lives, rights, autonomy, and property of other people and expect that being respected for you as well. Sure. And then this weird thing happens sometime maybe I guess in our maybe teenage years where we're told, well, actually it's a little more complicated. We live in a society, and in order for us to be able to have a functioning society, there's got to be a little bit of theft and a little bit of coercion and a little bit of disrespect of autonomy and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And, before you know it, we become these like jaded people that are just trying to figure out how to get through life. And if we're able to bridge that gap with people and let them know, no, what you were told originally is the truth.
Yes.
The lie was what they told you later.
Yes.
Not only don't we need those things, but those are actually creating the mess that we're in right now. Being more free doesn't just mean being able to do what you want. It also means being safer. It means being healthier. It means being more prosperous. It means having a more civil society. It means not having the chaos that's being imposed upon us. When we do that, when we meet people where they are, when we show them that we care about their concerns, that we understand how we got here, and then we can show them the solutions to how to fix it, we can set this country free. We can set this world free.
One of the big problems I see is that the government is trying to enslave us. I mean, and not in chains, of course, not in chains, but certainly enslave our minds.
Yes.
Definitely through like welfare and other government dependency programs. They are trying to enslave our minds. So the question that I have is that how do we break that chain, the mental chain? Because yes, we had a whole civil war that broke the physical chains. We did. But the mental chain to me, is getting stronger these days. And even though I have not given up on us as free people.
Yep.
But how do you break that chain? Because I think it's getting stronger right now. That mental chain is getting stronger upon our freedoms and our liberties.
Absolutely. And in fact, Leon, it's an interesting thing. I went to a kind of a corollary to what you just said. I think a lot of times we get confused as to how we can have both an increasingly tyrannical government and also have a standing militia of hundreds of millions of gun owners who own billions of guns, and yet for some reason the government still just runs roughshod over us. And then a few years ago, I live in South Carolina, and I went to the Georgetown Rice Museum, I think it was called. And as part of that museum, they're showing what life was like for slaves on the plantations in Georgetown. These were some of the most brutal plantations because they were dealing with lavender, and it would actually get into their skin and into their bloodstream, and they die in their late teens and early 20s. Very brutal existence.
Yes.
And an interesting thing to note was at one point the slaves outnumbered their presumed owners and overseers as much as 10 or 20 to 1. But then it was even worse than that, because in addition to that, many of those slaves had guns. They were actually given weapons. And what they would do with the weapons was they would fight off crows that were threatening the crop. And the reward there was if they were able to kill a crow or kill a pest bird, then they got to eat it themselves. They didn't have to, give it over to the owners to eat, and they got to have their own bird that they had eaten themselves. So here you have a population of people who outnumber their captors 10 or 20 to 1, and the armed ones outnumber their captors 2 or 3 to 1, and all they can think is, man, I hope I get to shoot a bird today so I can get some food. That is mental. That is mental enslavement.
Right.
And and it was after obviously generations of the physical beating and destruction of the mindset that led them to just not even considering the fact that, we could just take this over and not be slaves. So going back to your original question, this is a country that was founded in rebellion, a country of people who, when they were told, yeah, we're thinking of introducing a 3% tax on one product, their response was to shoot at the government until they ran away and declare a new country. Actually, to declare a new country and then shoot at the existing occupying government until it ran away. And we've gone from that to arguing over whether or not the government should force us to inject a product from a company that has no liability for any adverse reactions that it creates in order to be able to be allowed to go into Walmart or the gym or a restaurant. That's how far we've come on that. And by the way, I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm against government forcing people to do something like that.
And I totally agree with that, Spike. You know what it is? I took the vaccine myself. I had the Moderna vaccine, but that was my choice. Right?
Yes.
That was my choice. My wife also did it. It was her choice.
Yes.
But now we're hearing about all these things, about these mandates, where they're actually, and you're right, they're actually attempting to force people to inject things into their bodies. This is our own sovereignty right here. And they want to violate it. They think they have the right to violate it. And you're right, we have come a long way from the founding of the nation to where we are today.
Yeah. So to go back to your question, what do? We need to talk to people, because most people don't care about freedom at this point. And that's a very depressing thing to say, but it's the truth. They are worried about how they're going to make ends meet, how they're going to be safe, how they're going to be healthy, are they going to be okay? And we have to talk to it from that standpoint, because liberty doesn't just make the most moral sense, and it isn't just the most free thing. It's also the best way to do things. We're always going to work together best voluntarily with actual stakeholders making the decision, than to have it imposed upon us by central planners who have no stake and no accountability and no incentivization to actually fix the problem. In fact, they have an incentivization to make it worse and to make us more scared. When we can show people how we got here through statism, and as you put it, the mental enslavement, and show them that our solution is freedom, and to dismantle that and to put the power and money and freedom back in the hands of the people where it always belonged, we can fix that. But it takes telling that story.
Indeed.
Yeah, and that's all excellent points, Spike. And it certainly feels like we're always tearing our hair out around here, just trying to figure out how to reach people on these things. But one of the reasons we wanted to have you on the show too is to find out a little bit about the process of your running for office. Because for a lot of libertarian types who decide they want to get politically active, it's always an uphill battle because the resources are really things you have to struggle to find, and there's not really a huge organization necessarily that's ready to go. So I was curious if you could tell us a little bit about your experience in running for vice president and some of the challenges you faced in that.
Well, there were two very stark phases and differences. One was when I was running for the nomination, and then the other was in the general election. In the nomination process, there was a team Vermin Spike or a team Supreme, but they mostly were working for Vermin. I'd get some help here and there, but for the most part, I was operating my campaign for VP mostly by myself with some assistance. And I was very appreciative for all the assistance I got. But I did a lot of like my own live streams. I would set up my own interviews. I would try to set up interviews for me and Vermin for stuff. I called, I think just over 200 of the 1,000 delegates. I talked to all the different people in the different regions and said, who are the delegates that you are pretty sure are hard no's for me? They're definitely not going to vote for me. I want to talk to them first. And so I called at least 200 or 300 delegates, most of whom were no's, and many of whom I was able to turn into either yeses or at the very least, okay, well, I'm okay with you. Maybe you're my second pick or something like that, which is a big part of why I won. So there was that. And also mostly trying to focus on, I kept waiting for the shoe to drop where someone else was going to come in and everyone was going to pick that person. So I was kind of more focused on just telling people, this is how we can run. Like, this is how we can win people to liberty. And with a lesser focus on, and yeah, by the way, if you want, I can be your VP candidate. And that seemed to work for me. So that was that phase. Going into the second phase where I'm now the nominee, it was a lot different. I now had entire teams, a social media team, a comms team, an events team, and a lot of this was shared teams with Joe. But I had some that, like, my social media team was my social media team. My comms team was my comms team. And we were, pretty well funded. And so, but now it was a matter of just getting in front of as many people as possible and making myself as available as possible to be able to do that, which is why we did the bus tour. I slept about 2 to 3 hours a day. I was up in the morning. I was flying to the next event. I was doing a morning event. I was doing interviews in between that to the lunchtime event, and then doing interviews and appearances in between then to the dinner event. If there was some time to build in some, meeting with some local interest group or something like that to talk with them about, our policies and their concerns or whatever. I was doing this stuff about 18 to 20 hours a day. And it was weird because I got tired afterwards, but I was actually like fully energized most of the time. It was weird. It was almost like being like, when you're like a 5-year-old and you're very excited and you're in front of people and you're meeting all these new people and you're happy and you get in the van and you fall asleep. That was kind of me. Like, I would go out, I would do all this stuff, and then they'd put me back on the bus and I'd immediately fall asleep until it was the next event where I'd get back out and, do the whole thing again. It was really incredible. The challenges, a lot of people when they're running for office, they have to deal with like the ballot access challenges and things like that, getting signatures. I helped take part in that in Pennsylvania, where we were kind of down to the wire and we were trying to get people to come out and volunteer. And, we were saying, hey, come on out with Spike and Joe. She was on the other side of the state, and help us, collect signatures. And it worked. We got more than double the signatures we needed at the end of the day, or at the end of that time. And just doing that. And I thought, this is happening in pretty much all 50 of the states. And that was incredible to think, here are these thousands of people going around the country just to get us on the ballot. Imagine if we could get on as easily as the Republicans and Democrats do, and didn't have to do all this, and could be campaigning during all of that time, and could be actually going out there and working on outreach and not spending money hiring people to either bringing out volunteers or hiring people per signature to get signatures for a ballot. And it was pretty eye-opening.
Wow. So, Spike, a question: Have you ever held elected office anywhere?
I have not, and I never ran for office before either. Like I said, my background is in business. I started a web design company when I was 16. I was involved in multiple startups over the years. When I was diagnosed with MS in 2016, I realized I needed to get that stress off my back, and I was in a position where I didn't need to work anymore, and so I retired and decided to focus my life on what my real passion was, which was talking about liberty to people. And that's what has led me here. But no, I actually technically I didn't even join the Libertarian Party until the end of 2019. I was always kind of on the outside trying to bring people into the movement, but I really wasn't a part of the LP. I had no interest in elected office until I was asked to run for the VP. And I still believe our main focus needs to be on making cultural changes, and the political changes will work downstream.
Will follow. I totally agree with that, actually. But you know, the reason why I was leading into this question, this was there's a problem that I see with holding elected office. You know, many times when people running for office like you did, they lay out all these broad visions and these great ideals, all these things about freedom and liberties and all that. And it seems like the minute they get into office, they become corrupted by that sense of power, that sense of authority that they have just
very often, yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think about that? And what do you think about how do you deal with that problem? Because I would like to see more libertarians in office, or let me say libertarian-minded people. They don't have to be libertarian per se, but certain libertarian-minded people. Mm-hmm. But too often, though, we see the corruption once they get there.
Yep.
And I don't know how we deal with that problem.
So this is the classic Lord of the Rings trilogy, right? You know, we got to get the ring so we can destroy the power, and then we get the ring and we're like, I can do so much good with this ring, right? So and this is what happens, right? And the tale there is very obvious. When power is so centralized that you can literally go in and make any decision you want, for the most part. You and a handful of other people can make whatever decision you want. And if it happens to line your pockets and the pockets of the people who put you office, then hey, all the better. And if there's there's no accountability, they've literally legislated themselves not to have any accountability for it, or their enforcers to have any accountability for it. Total or near immunity for everyone involved. And then we're shocked that leads to corruption, which is why, again, we need to focus on the culture. If we are constantly focusing primarily on politics, let's say we all win. Let's say that somehow we are able to win. And let's even pretend for a minute that we don't have to, in the current electorate, pander heavily on things that we don't believe in order to get elected, which of course we would. But let's say that we wouldn't. Let's say that we would say what we're going to do, and for some magic reason that hasn't happened in the last 50 years, the voters look at us and go, you know what? Let's vote Libertarian up and down the ballot, but we still think everything that we currently think. Again, this is not going to happen. This is a pipe dream hypothetical to drive home a point.
Yes.
If we got elected and the culture, the people still insisted that we do and maintain the structure that we were replacing, and if we get in there and realize, wow, look at the perks of this thing. Well, maybe we could do some marginal changes, but I certainly don't want to, mess up me getting free security and being able to fly all over the country whenever I want to.
That ring of power is looking pretty good.
look at all the good I could do from this public jet that it's basically a private jet that I can go around the whole world. I probably should meet that diplomat in Barbados and see if we can work out a trade deal again. This is what happens, right? So, but Leon and Jason, Tim, if we focus on the culture, and if we focus on making priority changes now before we even get into office, once we get into office, we will already have been working to dismantle that power, so it's not as centralized as it was in the first place. So there's not as much lack of accountability. And here's the secret sauce to that we don't like to talk about. We're not going to get in until we do that anyway. Right. It doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter how dynamic we are. It doesn't matter how many people we can reach. If everyone still has, as Leon put it, the mental slavery, if everyone still wants to be protected by the omnipotent state, then it's going to happen. They're not going to vote for us. We have to show our way works. And first we do that by bringing people into the movement on things we already agree on. I do not want to argue with normies. if there are normies out there who disagree with me on everything except lockdowns, then we're going to work together on lockdowns. We're going to go to our city councils and county councils and state legislatures and say, no more lockdowns. We are nullifying the lockdowns. Lockdowns are never happening. If I find someone that doesn't agree with me on a single other issue except for police and criminal justice reform, we're going to work together on that. We're going to go to our city councils and our county councils and our state legislatures and say, I want to end qualified immunity and civil asset forfeiture and no-knock raids and the war on drugs and decriminalize sex work and this, blah, 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 right? We're going to do the stuff that needs to be done. And in doing so, not only do we get what we want done, but we're showing these normies that we're the leaders. And the more we can talk with them on a regular basis, the more that they realize our way works. I have a perfect story for this. A man named Kevin Cohen, he was a congressional candidate in Ohio. He also came in third, but he was a congressional candidate in Ohio. When I was in Ohio about this time last year for the Ohio convention, during the convention, I was told that there was a Black Lives Matter protest being done by a group called the Heartbeat Movement, which was the local BLM group in Columbus at the State House. I said, well, I know where I'm going. So we went there. And when I got there, we told them who we were and that we were running for office. And they said, well, do you want to speak? And I said, no, I think you guys have that covered. We want to hear what you have to say. And so it's actually on YouTube. If you look it up on YouTube, me talking with the Heartbeat Movement in Columbus, it's pretty much the whole conversation. I think you lost the first 40, 50 seconds before they started recording. We had about a 10-minute long conversation. It was mostly them explaining why they were there and me listening to them. And then I said, hey, I got great news for you. We want to end qualified immunity. We want to end the war on drugs. We want to get rid of the occupational licensing laws that disproportionately harm poor communities and communities of color. We want to get rid of gun control laws that make you less able to defend yourself against not just private sector criminals, but public sector ones as well. We want to get rid of civil asset forfeiture. We want to get rid of the militarization of the police. We want to hold bad actors in government accountable. They endorsed us on the spot, but that's just the beginning. That's not even the real story. The real story is Kevin Cohen was watching me do all of this. And he said, if Spike Cohen can do that in 10 minutes, imagine what I can do living here in Ohio long term. And long story short, in the beginning of this year, he and a bunch of other non-libertarians formed a group called Accountability Now Ohio. And if you look at the leadership of Accountability Now Ohio, it's a bunch of young college graduate aged Black progressives and Kevin Cohen, a middle-aged Jewish libertarian. And he made this connection with them because they work together on the thing they already agree on. But here's where it gets really cool, guys. The purpose of Accountability Now Ohio is to push for a constitutional referendum, a constitutional amendment to end qualified immunity. But originally, it wasn't just going to be for that. Originally, it was going to be they were also going to push for mandatory minimum increase in the minimum wage. They were going to push for universal health care in Ohio, socialized health care. They were going to push for a bunch of left-wing stuff we don't agree with. And they came to Kevin and said, yeah, we were kind of hoping to do this stuff too. And Kevin said, look, if you guys want to do that on your own, I'm perfectly fine with that. But I really rather not be a part of that. I'm a libertarian. We believe that people should be paid, be able to be paid something that they can live off of. We believe that, people should be able to get the health care they need and so forth. We just think that government's a really bad way to do it. I mean, if you think about it, here we are, we're basically asking the government to be held accountable when they kill us. They're not who I want to be in charge of these things. Not only did they drop that, but they started having conversations with him about that. This is how you bring people into liberty.
Well, Spike, we're almost at the end of our show here, but as a real quick parting shot, I think almost all of our listeners would want to know, what are your plans? Are you planning to continue to run for office, or are you planning to work behind the scenes? Just as a real quick thing.
I'm here to grow the movement. Whatever the best use of me and my time and my talents and resources are, that's what I'm here for. And if that means I should run for office in the future, then so be it. If it means that I'm just here helping, lead by example, how we can go across the country and set the country free, then so be that. I've made no decisions for the immediate future in terms of running in 2024 or 2028 or anything like that. I honestly, whether I was running or not, I wouldn't be doing anything differently anyway. I'm here to grow the movement. I'm not going anywhere. We're just getting started, and I'm excited to spark the revolution.
Indeed. And Spike, I'm totally with you. Set the country free. I'm totally with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, man.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us on this show. We're going to have another show with you as a guest in a little bit on some specific topics. But thanks so much for joining us on this particular episode. And I'm sure all of our guests loved hearing about your past and your journey through liberty at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for